In this movie, we're going to look at something called static properties and static methods. Static properties and methods are attached to a class rather than attached to an instance of a class. To understand the need for static properties and methods, take a look at the TV on the stage here. It's at the top left of the stage. What if I wanted to align it to the center of the stage? Now I could easily write that code in the timeline, and I don't necessarily need to create a custom class for it, except for that's kind of a common task in ActionScript, is aligning the object to the center of the stage. So you want to write code that's reusable, but at the same time, you don't want to have to create a new instance of a class every time you want to align an object to the center of the stage. This is where static properties and methods come into play. What we're going to do is create a static method that will align this object to the center of the stage. Before we do that, we'll take a look at how static properties work. I'm going to jump over to my utils.as file, and above the constructor here, I'm going to create a public static property, so var, that's the syntax for creating a static property, and I'm going to call this static prop. I'm going to data type it to a string, and I'm going to give it a value of static. When you're defining a static property, you want to give it a value when you define it. The reason for that is when you're working with static properties and methods, you may never actually create an instance of the class that you're working with. There may not be another opportunity to define the value of that property. So let's save this file. So file save, jump over to our FLA file, and we'll trace utils.staticprop. So I'm going to trace utils.staticprop. Notice I never created an instance of the utils class. I can just access that property directly through the utils class. Test the movie, and there's the value of the property in the output window. So now that we've looked at how to create a static property, let's create a static method that can be reused. I'm going to delete the trace statement and jump over to utils.as. Here what I'm going to do is create a public static method right below the constructor. So public static function, and then I'm going to call this align to center. And this is going to align an object to the center of the stage. So I'm going to pass in an object. I'm just going to call that obj. And I'm not going to data type it to a movie clip. I want this to be usable for any kind of visual object. I'm going to call the data type display object. So any object that's visible, this is going to be any object that has an X or a Y property or width or height. I'll return void and write some curly braces. Now remember, because of polymorphism, we can pass in any object that inherits from display object. So that's going to make movie clips count. Our custom TV class we created earlier in this chapter would count. Basically any visual class. This allows for maximum reuse. So first thing we'll do is set the object's X position. Now centering an object to the center of the stage is just a simple mathematical formula. Take the object, so obj, set its X position equal to half the stage's width. Now if we just type stage, the utils class doesn't have a stage property, so it won't know what you're talking about. So we're going to rather get the stage of the object. So it's obj.stage.stage width, that's the width of the stage, space, /space, 2. So the half the width of the stage. That'll align the left edge of the object, assuming it has top left alignment, with the center of the stage. So now what we need to do is subtract half of the object's width to shift it in the right amount to the left so it'll be centered with the stage. So we'll subtract obj.width divided by 2. So the X position of the object is half the stage width minus half the object's width. That'll center the object to its stage. Let's copy and paste this line of code on the next line and just modify a few things to make this apply to a Y position. So set the object's Y position equal to obj.stage.stage height divided by 2 minus obj.height divided by 2. And that will center the object vertically. And before we test it out, there's one more thing we have to do. See how we're using the display object class? If we were to test the movie without importing that class in here, we would get an error. Remember that when you're creating classes in ActionScript, anytime you use a class that is not what's called a top level class, then you need to import that class into your code. You can find out which classes are top level classes in Flash Help. In general, top-level classes are basic things like strings, arrays, numbers, XML data, and Boolean variables. So any visual object needs to be imported. So above our class declaration, I'm going to import the display object class. That's inside of the flash.display package. So import flash.display.display object. All right, I'll save the file, jump back over to our FLA file, go to the timeline, open up the Actions panel, and then I'm going to run that method to align the TV to the center of the stage. It's utils.align to center, and then pass in that TV movie clip, which is TV_MC, test the movie, and the TV is aligned exactly to the center of the stage. So using static properties and methods, all you have to do is add the word static. So you can use your access modifier. After that, use the word static, and then define your property or method as usual. And as you can see in this file, one of the great uses for static properties and static methods is that we can have a method like this align to center method that we can reuse all the time with as little code as possible.